Computer issues because it seems like that always happens, right? So we're working on Tim and Nick and Tim and various other people that are called are all trying to work on that. Thank you for coming. We'll get started in 2 minutes.
Hello, hello. Oh, why is it always these technical fun things? So we just had to quickly send out a new link to all of those folks that are trying to watch on. Hopefully now it's good. Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it. First, thank you, Father, Pastor Bert Rambo, for letting us use the church. Yay, we really appreciate that. Couple quick announcements. A reminder that part 2 of the Springfield Work Party is this weekend. What time? We don't know. Are we doing it? 9. Oh, there's Teresa. What time is that today? 9. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Memorial Building. We also, you haven't seen anything about it yet, but we're going to schedule a Trinity Work Party for May 4th. That's a Saturday. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Thank you, Mike. And a reminder that we have on our calendar Saturday, June 8th for our party. Yay. Location to be determined.
Also, a Springfield celebration at Public House on the 21st, so this Sunday. I believe the time I set was 4 to 7, something like that.
And Springfield crew is having a party this Sunday.
This Sunday. So working on Saturday, celebrating on Sunday.
Okay.
Come to balls, come to either. Let me
Can
off.
Springfield people come and celebrate you?
Sure.
Yay. All right, why are we here? Ice storm. Saturday, January 13th is when it started. We sprung into action like we always do because of temperature. And then, before we knew it, it was Wednesday. And we had lived through very, very, very difficult thing, and it would not work without all of you. I'm not going to go into all the details right now because that's why we're here, and we can talk about that. There have been lots of folks that have already worked really hard to make sure that we don't let this happen again. A great active group of folks in Springfield and others who have testified already before the City Council and the Board of Commissioners, submitted testimony, continue to engage folks in that process. The county had a hot wash process, and that's a term that means hot because you want to do it right away, right after an event, to look at what happened, what needed to be different, et cetera, et cetera. St. Vincent de Paul was included in that process, and that happened on March 20th. And I was there, and I represented you all as best I could, but you made it known, and the folks in leadership want to be able to talk to you directly. This is just one of those opportunities to hear from folks. We have folks in the city and county here, and I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany in just a minute and let her introduce other folks that are here. But we also have in our pocket to have the county and other leaders come and talk to you directly before we open again this fall. To say, hey, what happened with this process? What did you talk about? What's going to be different? Tell us everything you've learned. So that's going to be coming as well, where you're going to be able to have a chance to talk to the folks at the top. And so, yes.
One thing. So for people watching at home on YouTube, the YouTube chat is not enabled. So they're going to have to email questions to Kim at Egan Volunteers. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
I can't hear me.
So Nick is in the back. Hi, Nick. We had technical issues. If you're watching online at YouTube, that means that, yay, you got the message that you had to use a different link, but we were not able to figure out how to turn on the chat feature. So it sounds like you're not going to be able to submit questions or comments, but our volunteer coordinator, Kim, is here. You can send an email right now to her if you want, and she can pass those questions along. That's egan.volunteers@svdp.us. And we'll make sure we include that. So in just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Bethany Carledge, the head of St. Vincent de Paul, just for a minute to say thank you to you all. And then we're going to quickly get it over to Tiffany. Tiffany is the Lane County Emergency Manager. She started right after the ice storm. So what an opportunity for her to be able to look at all of this with eyes that are, unfiltered, because she was new. And so I think that's actually a great opportunity for her and for us to learn from that.
So Tim, was there a person in that position before, during the ice
There
storm?
was Teresa asked if there was somebody in that position. There was somebody acting in that position. I'll let Tiffany go for all that. So when we turn it over to Tiffany, she's going to talk about whatever she wants to say about the ice storm, and then pretty quickly get it over to questions and comments from you all. So we will do that. For those that are here in person, bathrooms are back through that door right over there, down the hallway. There's some water in the back. Tiffany is happy to have folks email her directly. I think that's been some communication, or we'll get that to you. Or you can send any comments and questions to our volunteer coordinator, Kim, and we will get all of that forwarded to Tiffany. So, Bethany, I'm going to have you come up first. We'll start there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I have just a few things that I really wanted to emphasize to the volunteers. And the largest one wasn't just a thank you for that January ice storm, but really for the ongoing operations of Egan. Because this program, I think the Paul would not be possible without the volunteers. And it's something that internally Tim, Nick, and I have spoken about frequently, that it's a program that saves lives. And I'm incredibly thankful that we have so many individuals in the community who are committed to the most vulnerable and are willing to continually raise their hand and help support. So I really wanted to say thank you. And then outside of that, I wanted to say that when we internally kind of put our notes together as far as what worked really well, what were the challenges, and what are our recommendations to the city and the county, and the top three strengths of the event was volunteer response. This was a system that worked well as far as volunteers who are willing to come out, staff are willing to come out, even when they themselves didn't have power. So I really just want to emphasize and say thank you for all of your efforts, not only during January, but ongoing. I'm excited that there's a lot of energy with both the city and the county level in addressing some of the gaps in services. One of the things that's most present on our minds is having a permanent site for Springfield and Eugene. And I do want to echo what Tim has said. I think it's really fortuitous timing for Tiffany to come on. And what an opportunity to right away be able to analyze what worked, what didn't work, and what do we need to do moving forward. This is an amazing time, and I'm glad that she has that energy to start off with and that she can continue to carry this process forward. Thank you. And thank you, Tim and Nick. I don't ever give you guys a shout out. You guys do an incredible job. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Mike.
And Mike.
Okay, let's see how this works, if I've got it in the right place. Doesn't have a volume on it, so I'll have to adjust. So hello, thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for having this in the church and feeling a little more relaxed. Just kidding, I'm feeling pretty relaxed. My name is Tiffany Brown. Tim asked me to tell you a little bit about myself before I got started. Yes, I showed up on February 5th. New to the county, not new to the job. I've been doing this job for 13 years in Clatsop County, which is up on the north coast. And the story of your heart inside and more. What's maybe important about that is that doing that work, we spend a lot of time talking about Cascadia's defection zone, ground zero, people being isolated from one another. I wear another hat at the regional state level. I am a member and the standing chair of the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Commission, OSPAC. And that's the commission in the state that drives policy and legislation, makes recommendations to the governor and our legislatures about how we become a more resilient state than Cascadia. If you're ready for Cascadia, if you're ready for anything, that's what we tell people. So this ice storm really brought a lot of lessons about Cascadia that we don't get, and isolation is one of them. And I'm not going to talk a lot generally. I really want to get to just a few opening remarks. And I guess I'll stand up here. It didn't feel like I should be up here. Anyway, I can see you better here. So, let's see. So I started as a dispatcher. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And I'm a native of the Willamette Valley. I grew up in Albany. I went to U of O. I kind of made a circuit, and I made my way back. And I feel like I'm home. I'm really happy to be here. I want you to know before we get into the weeds on this that I have heart for the work that you do. I come to this space with a very, but for the grace of God go I attitude, and I appreciate everything you bring to bear to work with the most vulnerable among us. It's not work that I could do. So thank you for that, and thank you for being part of this system. It is a crown jewel in this county. I could tell before I got here, and it's because of the good people in this room that it's well supported, and we want to ensure that it continues to be well supported, and that your work is not undermined by other needs in the community that we haven't taken care of, because I think that's what happened in this ice storm. So let me talk a little bit about the role of the county emergency management versus city emergency management versus fire departments. I exist for one reason, and that is that when we have a really bad day, that is a day when the good people like you who are working in shelters and firefighters and public health and police officers reach a point where they can no longer provide the resources and capability that's needed, when it's spilling over the edges for them, I get stood up to provide additional resources and support to help them continue to do their jobs, to provide that continuity to the public services that we provide as a county or the city or a fire district or as a sheltering system. And so really, when people get in line, when the county EOC is activated and the responders get in line, you're part of that group that comes to the table and says, we've exhausted all of our resources, all of our mutual aid, all of the things that we usually rely on are tapped out, and now we need your help. And so that's what everyone does. That's what the cities do. That's what the fire districts do. And the reason that county emergency management is important is because in this state, in every state in the country, every county is required to have a county emergency management office for the sole function of sending information up and getting information back from the state. It all goes through the county emergency operations center. And so it's a robust responsibility. And the thing that makes it hard is that it changes every time. It's never the same two ways. Not that the fire's ever the same or a public health emergency, but we're really just kind of playing whack-a-mole, supporting whoever comes to the table and needs support in that given emergency. And it can be new partners, it can be people we haven't worked with before. And so that's why this is important. It's not that we haven't worked before, but we know that developing relationships before the emergency is important. I think we've had a relationship. I think that relationship was taxed, and I think it pushed us beyond our capability and beyond your capability, and so it's time to have a conversation among ourselves, those who serve the agencies in the county, about how we can do better next time. So I'm the county emergency management staff. You're also familiar with our county public health staff. In our county emergency operations center, they are your ambassadors, for lack of a better word. They support your program, and they come and behave as a liaison. And so I want to just take a minute to introduce a few of the kind of partners we have here today. I have my boss, Steve Adams, who's here representing the county manager's office. Joe Roberts with Public Health. Sierra Anderson is the city emergency manager for Eugene. Do we know if we have Ken on the line yet? Ken Bogany with the city of Springfield?
He just got the new link, so he is
Okay.
going to be joining.
I think we'll have Ken joining us soon. Maria Cortez. Maria was trying to hide over there. Is anyone else? Okay, great. I think I got everyone. And so those are just a few of the key. I could talk all night about county roles and staff, but I'm going to try to keep it so we can spend most of this time hearing from you. And so, what's the ice storm review process? So yes, February 5th was my first day, and they said, oh, and at 1 o'clock, we want you to lead the county hot wash. And we'll bring our 35 department heads in and talk about, and it actually was great. If you understand very much about my job, then you understand more than my dad does. It's like a pretty squishy job. And so without a disaster, I'd be showing up at doorsteps saying, hey, I'm Tiffany, the emergency manager. You may or may not know what that is. What are we going to do together? Instead, it was like, this is what we're going to do together. We're going to have a hot wash. We did it just as county staff, and that was by design. That gave us a blueprint for where we needed to go moving forward, meaning that we need to give any areas of the response acute attention, and sure enough, we did. And this was the first one on the list. We also had a special hot wash, and that's just a debriefing meeting for emergency support function 8, which is public health and medical, for some coordination issues we have with the hospital and our medical partners. We had one with the dispatch center to talk about alert and warning. I'm not going to get into it today, but people were like, we get notified all the time during wildfires. Why didn't we hear from you during the ice storm? We're going to work on that. And so we did one on damage assessments, and then we had 2 to just kind of wrap everything up, a total of 6. That ended a couple weeks ago, and this is kind of the last listening session that we include in that report. and I'll be presenting to the Board of Commissioners on April 30th. And I would encourage you to listen in. You'll hear some things there that you don't hear tonight, and it'll be wrapped up nicely. I just started that a couple days ago. So, okay, so thank you for your contributions already. As Tim said, he came to the hot wash. We had rolled up, we rolled up conversations and took away areas of improvement, and from those we draw action items, things that we will do to harden our system and to make it work better next time. Back to things happening differently every time. Because of that, in emergency management, we operate under something just called a continuous cycle of improvement. That means we try our best, we give ourselves grace when something new happens and we don't do it that well. We identify the gap, we work it into our plan, we train, and then we do it better next time. I haven't been here for long, but I know that Wayne County has done that repeatedly through other events and other incidents and other areas of the Emergency Operations Center that they've strengthened, and we'll do it again here. So before I let you talk, I want to just kind of tell you what I heard, and generally where I see that calls to us for action, and kind of generally what that is. What I heard was that the ice storm overwhelmed a system, your system, that ordinarily operates very well. That yes, you exceeded resources and you needed help, but because there was not a system for folks that weren't unhoused, displaced residents, people getting emerged from the hospital, it overwhelmed your system. And your system wasn't equipped to deal with that, and your system isn't created to deal with that. We know in emergency management, there are a lot of best practices around not co-locating things, right? We don't collate an emergency operations center with the Red Cross shelter. We don't co-locate, and we know that we don't co-locate unhoused sheltering with the general public, if we can avoid it.
Or if it's the general public?
Why?
I'm saying,
I mean, if they're not the general public, I don't know who is.
residents, displaced residents, I'm sorry, poor choice of
Homeowners or renters.
Okay.
Okay.
Folks that on the day the bad thing happens, had a house to live in, had it at the beginning, and then they find themselves without. So I apologize. This is new language for me, and so I come to you humbly, and I appreciate the opportunity to be corrected. Thank you. So that's what overwhelmed it. We had folks that got discharged from the hospital and didn't have a place to go. We had folks that didn't have heat at their home, and they needed a place to go. And the gap is that the county didn't have a sheltering system set up for, and I say the county, the cities, we didn't have it set up. We didn't have the resources. It wasn't a well-oiled machine like yours to accommodate those new folks that needed a place to stay temporarily before they could go back to their homes. And what we uncovered was that there were gaps in that system where we don't have necessarily active agreements. We all think about Red Cross providing shelter, but it doesn't always work that way. And so those are our gaps. Those are the places we need to strengthen the mass care system outside of this demographic, so to ensure that this thing won't happen again, that we have folks that aren't part of your typical environment showing up to overwhelm your environment. So that's the first piece I heard. The second thing I heard was that you did run out of resources and that you didn't feel that there was an appropriate vector for seeking those resources through the county emergency or where do we go? And so that's the second thing that we'll be figuring out. We invited people to the ESS 6 and 8 hot washes. We'll be inviting them back to work on programs in the Emergency Operations Center, training, processes that we work, and eventually looking at any policies that we can implement that support this moving forward. Another piece that we've identified is that we need to understand better how the cities and counties decide to activate their emergency operations centers. What's their threshold for activating? And how do we determine between the cities and the county where the responsibilities lie to not support this group necessarily, but to stand up and strengthen the muscle for the other piece. I think that's what I have, unless any of my counterparts feel I missed anything? No? Okay, so we have a big group here, and I hope I've left you ample time.
I'm going to make, just when folks have questions, when we get to that point, I'm going to go around with a microphone, so if you can raise hands, so then the next person can have that, because if you're not speaking into the microphone, then nobody online can hear your question, and we won't get it recorded that way. So if you could wait until you have the microphone. Are you ready for questions now?
I'm ready for questions.
I'm going to start with one that we got from a volunteer who emailed, and then I'll come over to you, Michelle, just to get us started. If the event were to be reimagined, what would a hearty, fully robust, and ideal response look like?
That's my question for this group. Yeah. Well, for me, it's that I wouldn't be here 2 months later answering questions, right? That we do it right the first time. Maybe it's not perfect, but that we aren't like, darn, we did that again. That we're at least discovering new challenges. So if that's a great way to frame anything, any remarks or responses that anybody has, should we just get started with that? And if you want to frame it a different way, we can, but that is the way that we, when we have hot washes, we say, what do the successes look like? What did the areas of improvement look like? What does right look like? What does it look like to do it right? Okay, so let's get started.
Michelle.
So my name is Michelle Taylor, and I was at the Springfield site for quite a bit of this ice storm. And I appreciate your point about trying to keep the unhoused communities separate from people who lost power.
Michelle, I'm sorry.
It should be going, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're really close to the mic.
Really close to the mic. Okay. So I'm going to start over again. So I understand your point that the unhoused community that are generally Egan clients should not have been mixing with the people who lost power who came in. That's true. It's certainly true that there were no Red Cross stations, there was no Red Cross stations set up. But I think the important thing that you're missing is that this happened during Martin Luther King weekend. And so when we generally ask our guests to leave at 8 in the morning, there was ice on the ground. It was 15 degrees. There was nowhere for them to go. And you have to understand that our guests are in wheelchairs, they're in walkers, they regularly soil themselves. This was a huge crux of the situation, is that the Egan policy is very clear of when we ask our guests to leave. There was nowhere for them to go, and it just put the volunteers in a really difficult situation. And I'm sure that other morning people would want to talk more about that, but there has to be somewhere for our
Couldn't even
guests.
put them on the bus. Couldn't even put them on the bus.
Cahoots wasn't running, LTD wasn't running,
Nothing.
nothing was running. We couldn't get taxis to get them anywhere. And our kind-hearted volunteers were not going to turf them out at 8 o'clock in the morning when it's 15 degrees and there's 6 inches of ice on the ground. That's like a critical piece that you need to be thinking about.
Thank you.
Gonna go David, then Melissa, John,
How's that been
Barbara.
addressed? I mean, that's a good question. Has it been addressed? Places for people to go. cold morning.
So, whoa.
I'm sorry, but that's, I mean,
No.
wasn't it a question along those lines?
Yeah, like, what, you know,
Yeah.
15
So,
degrees, what do you
so
do?
my role, and I'm not trying to sidestep the question, but my role is to coordinate and help support operational. I don't solve problems for firefighters. I mean, I'm happy to come to the table with ideas, but you know best your operations. I would encourage you to ask for what you think you need, to think outside the box for us to have the conversation together. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, who would that be? Like, what does that look like? And if you think the government, the county, the city has a role in filling that gap, then
Somebody does.
then let's connect the dots about what it looks like and turn that into a conversation.
Well, we were told, so that when it became clear that Egan was getting overwhelmed, that there was another agency, I think it was Carry It Forward.
Well, I really want to make sure we try to speak
Okay.
to the mic, otherwise nobody else can hear.
Okay.
Let's-
Sorry.
The question happens, I mean, it is a question in terms of whether it has to be addressed. You know, if it happens, then it happens. That's, the answer is no.
Yeah, so we were told that Carry It Forward was going to bring in a whole group of people, because, you know, volunteers couldn't get in, there was ice on the ground. So we had a lot of guests coming and very few volunteers. We were told that I think it was Carry It Forward was going to come in and bring a whole bunch of volunteers to relieve us, to just keep the shelter going, but there was some administrative problem that whole thing got shut down, and it kind of left us in the lurch.
Okay.
I can address this, I can address that part. That was a subcontract with St. Vincent de Paul, but we just didn't have time to figure out. So that wasn't anything to do with the county. It was our shelter to run the Egan shelter in Springfield that night. All right, David, then Melissa.
Well, something in your initial talk kind of stood out to me in that at the Egan Warming Center, we don't differentiate between housed and unhoused. You mentioned in your earlier that the differentiation was there, that we had housed people mixed with unhoused people. Moving forward, is the county looking at providing separate spaces for our unhoused residents and our housed residents during a crisis? Because honestly, some of the most prepared people for this was our unhoused population.
Yes, I heard that.
And some of our housed guests that stayed with us said they felt safer at our shelter with our unhoused guests than we did later in a COVID shelter.
I heard that when you gave me a tour of the center. You also told me that those folks that you weren't used to seeing overwhelmed the system. And so that's what I'm addressing. And here's the thing. I'm not trying to marginalize anyone. Everyone gets better service, right? If they're in a place that's there to meet their needs. And so that's all I meant. Not to undermine the services that we're ordinarily doing. And, yeah, so here's an example, fire. I think this was a misunderstanding among just even the municipal partners, that the county was responsible for any other housing. And I think that conclusion is easily reached if you've watched the wildfire environment, because those are the unincorporated areas. Those are the folks for whom we have legal responsibility. We did coordinate housing. We're also there to help the cities coordinate additional sheltering services. So I think in a perfect world, we have resources set up for other types of sheltering. You know, decompression sheltering was a new thing that came up in this. People that are leaving the hospital with medical needs, that's a specific type of sheltering. If something had happened when schools were in session, we'd have a very specific type of sheltering that only children were part of. So I think our invitation here is to think more broadly about what kind of mass care needs we could need in a big event. Did I feel like it.
No.
I feel like.
You feel like you answered it all.
Well, then ask it again.
Is the county planning commingled shelters for housed and unhoused, looking at an emergency event in the future?
We don't have a plan for folks that aren't unhoused. That's what
Segregation is the word.
I'm just saying, you have a plan, and aside from a few churches that have offered services and, oh, we could do a shelter, none of that came to fruition during this ice storm. So we need to sit down and find out when we need sheltering for additional, and no, anybody would be welcome, but we saw a place where we didn't have enough capacity. So whatever that looks like, and hopefully we have the ability to tailor it for what we need.
Where I work with Blue River Fire Victim Shelters.
Sorry, you really have to.
I work with Blue River Fire Shelter victims and unhoused people who live within that same community. And there was some disassociation in who deserved help. I don't want that to happen in the emergency. And I don't want any shelter-based, if it's the Bob Kiefer Center or the Wheeler Pavilion, I don't want to hear of any shelter turning away somebody because they're unhoused.
No, we're trying to keep folks out of your system so that you're not overwhelmed. That's our main priority.
If folks could try not to cross-talk and yell across, because we really want to make sure folks online can hear. Just raise your hand and I'll come around and get you as soon as I can. Thanks.
My name is Melissa, and I have worked with the City of Eugene for 24 years. And when I first signed up for that role, it was made clear to me that I could be commandeered in an emergency. And I took that pretty seriously. I worked at the library, and I was also, a site lead at Wheeler. I had 275 medically fragile folks, 4 porta potties that were, food was at the rim, trash that hadn't been taken out in days. We're not set up to be a day shelter, but we had people there for the day, and that was pushing all of our resources. We ran out of food, we ran out of blankets, we ran out of mats. Everyone was on their best behavior, but there was no place for people to go. So I work at a library building that I know when it was built, it was designed to be a triage center in the case of an emergency. And for me to, as a city employee, say, well, it's too dangerous for me to go to work. But it's okay for like a 77-year-old volunteer to get in their car and try to get down from the South Hills to go and help at Egan. So those decisions of keeping our employees safe, our city and our county employees safe, is on the backs of these volunteers who don't have the health insurance that we have. They don't have the public support I have my salary, I have my sick days, I have, there's a lot that I get from being a public servant. And I feel like I have a responsibility to the community, and I don't feel like we have been asked to do that. I was talking with someone from LTD the other day. We were chatting about the ice storm, and she said that employees of LTD who work for RideSource were using their own personal cars to go and take people for dialysis. So I had 3 people with medical emergencies at Wheeler that morning, and each time I called the paramedics, they said, well, they're not really ambulance worthy. We only have 1 ambulance going right now. We can't take them. So I feel like part of the solution to this problem is opening our community centers, opening the library, getting the rec vans, which have chains, and train drivers to take people up for snow trips, utilizing those, utilizing the RideSource vans, training people how to drive in the snow. So we're looking for solutions, not just to be heard. Like, we're looking for solutions, and the county needs to put pressure on the city. There is no political will to make this happen. I've tried talking with my city councilor multiple times, and he won't return my calls. I've talked to leadership in the library and in Larks. They've been very, they're like, those are great ideas, but someone needs to say, yes, we're going to pay for this, and yes, we're going to take the risk. So for me I'm also a neighborhood leader, right? And so my little prop card that gets me into the library also gets me into the community center, because that's where we do our meetings. So we could use city and county employees to be the people who would go and open the doors. We're not going to do everything perfectly. We don't know where all the light switches are. But that could have been a safe, warm, safe place for 80 people to come and stay. So I feel like we need to take that role of, public service more seriously. We knew that this storm was going to happen, and we are not going to get any notice when it's the earthquake. We need to have a plan. We need to have people who can open doors. We need generators at those community centers. We need schools to be able to open their gyms for people. There was one school in Springfield that opened their gym, but just to students of that particular school. So we need places, and that's going to take pressure from the county to tell the city, you are required to do this. We are not going to be able to survive just by pointing fingers at, well, it's not our responsibility, it's not our responsibility. And I guarantee you, there are many, many city employees who will step up and go the distance when there's an emergency. Some people can't. They have small children at home or elders at, but, if you ask us, there are many of us who are willing to step up. So please,
Yes,
put
thank you.
some pressure on the city. Hi, Garrett.
We've heard that. We heard that in our hot boxes.
One more thing. One more thing too, is that the city of Springfield, not to shame the city of Eugene, but the city of Springfield has offered that memorial building for Egan as a semi-permanent spot to be able to store our stuff. It takes us so much volunteer time to haul our crap back and forth every single time. If we had a permanent location, it would make it safer. It would make it so the resources were being distributed more equitably. And it is the city's responsibility to find a spot. We can't guarantee on the Wheeler Pavilion having some logging show or something that nixes us out. And if the M Stadium gets built there, I don't even know what's going to happen then. But we need a permanent spot, not just for the unhoused, but for the whole system when people can't be in their homes.
Okay, I've got Barbara, John, Dorothy, other John.
Hi, my name's Barbara. Sorry, I wrote my question down. So in what you said about the county emergency coming in when all of the resources are overwhelmed, why doesn't that happen a little earlier than when everything else is overwhelmed? Why does it have to wait until we're already almost broken?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we did a late start on this. To your point, we didn't have a lot of. We discovered inconsistencies with the weather, but people have leaned in. That's what I hear in the hot washes. Let's just lean in next time. My public health director said, just call me. I'll just call it an exercise so that we're ready. When we get the call that we've already got people. We're not saying, oh, well, they're calling, let's get people into the EOC. And so that's absolutely. And when I talk about the training and working in the EOC on those systems, that's exactly what we're talking about. We acknowledge that we could have been moving into that sooner.
And then how does this tie into disaster preparedness?
So not to diminish any of the genuine gaps that occurred in this, but this situation was largely out of control for a lot of people. And a lot of the things that we rely on ordinarily weren't there. And people weren't able to get to work. And so we're going to work on all of these things that make this system work better, but it really highlights in that catastrophic environment when folks are isolated the importance of personal preparedness. I think people that were prepared were surprised by this, people that thought they were prepared, and we know that folks that aren't prepared or don't have the means to prepare are disproportionately impacted by disasters. And so it's we get this little golden moment after something bad happens where people are really paying attention to preparedness and thinking about what they do next. How do you think it fits into preparedness?
So I have quite a few thoughts about this conversation overall. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize is just how important I think it is to become familiar with the sort of state of the Egan services as they are. This is not, it feels like in some of your remarks, this feels like this has been an existing service that was simply overtaxed. I would say it is a shoestring operation that is nowhere near designed to support anything that we were doing at the time. And that shoestring operation functionally was relied upon by our city and county government to prevent their other services from being further overwhelmed. It was one of the stark realizations I had. You know, I don't want to make too much about myself. I worked a 17-hour shift when I signed up for 4 hours because there was no relief. There was nobody coming. Every time we tried to tell our city and our county that we needed people, silence. You know, there's lots to be said about that. And you invited us to email you. I promise you I will be emailing you about the details of that and some of where I think some of the failings were. But what I wanted to mention on top of that is that one of the stark realizations at that point was that if we pushed people out the door, you know, we decided not to. We decided to keep the doors open because it was the only humane thing to do. And at that point, we sort of stopped being vegan center. I've never been entirely clear about what happened after that point. As far as I can tell, we were illegally occupying buildings and I'm proud I'd do it again. But if we had pushed people out on the ice, it was slick. They could not even walk 2 blocks to sit underneath City Hall. So what would have happened at that point is people would have fallen. They would have broken hips, they would have broken arms, they would have ended up in the emergency room where there was no room as it was. Then if they were able to get through, likely as not, they would have started fires in alleyways or broken into buildings to get there because that's the only humane thing that they could do to take care of their own lives and the lives of people they care about. So I think it's really important in your conversations. I hope you will emphasize to city government and to the county as well that this is a priority they need to meet. And relying on unpaid volunteers and often of elderly age to do this work for them is disgusting. It should not have happened on just a regular cold morning, let alone on a morning like this.
Thank you.
Following up on what John said, there's one of the big gaps that there is that Egan, as we normally run, goes from around, or houses people from around 6 p.m. till 8 o'clock the next morning. But if it's dangerous conditions, slick, freezing weather that people could die in during the daytime, there's not a resource that we have, except for what John was describing, and that worked only so well. We probably kept people from dying, which is why we show up, but it's not a solution to any disasters, much less one like this. So the whole daytime, and how to get people from place to place, to Egan, away from Egan, to the next place they might go, is a big gap in the whole thing that really needs to be addressed. It's not, we don't have those resources. It's not something that we could do if we could just somehow double the number of volunteers. We could easily absorb double the number of volunteers just to do what we do now. But the transportation and the buildings and things. So what I originally got on the list to ask you was, I could have sworn that I heard you say the words city shelters and county shelters. Are there such things? And what makes them
the municipalities, counties, cities are responsible for sheltering services within their jurisdictional boundaries. That's how that works. So that's why we've seen the county, coordinating resources for people up to McKenzie and whatnot. So I think this was new. I think cities understanding that there may be a situation where they have a large number. Wildfire doesn't affect the city, so they haven't seen it in that context. So I think it creates an opportunity for the cities to realize that they may have sheltering needs outside of those that they think they've already gotten taken care of.
So is this a matter that's being discussed? Is there a possibility that shelters like that could be made ready?
I think there are pieces of that everywhere. You know, I immediately turned around after this and reached out to Red Cross and said, who do you have contracts with in the county? And I found something similar I found in my own county when I did this 10 years ago. You have churches and facilities that think they have a contract with Red Cross, but they don't. Red Cross has shelters, places, right? And then, and the beauty to having Red Cross is that they provide shelter training and they cover the liability. So there are good reasons to have Red Cross. The problem is that Red Cross is your community. So if you don't have a deep bench of Red Cross volunteers, that's why I think we need to consider Red Cross as one of our resources. This is what I did in my last county, is I was thinking through a catastrophic environment where half of the shelters wouldn't even be habitable, that we start doing an assessment and inventory of what exists in our county. Where are the facilities? Where are the people separated from one another? What are the resources of those facilities? Who has agreements? Who's willing to have an agreement? And then who staffs those shelters? That's a big question. And I agree with your point that it is a responsibility for us to pitch in and understand how we can fill that gap.
Each neighborhood should identify locations in the neighborhood, and residents in the neighborhood may need help. Each neighborhood should have a spot where people can walk to without having to send it to that location.
All right, I've got John and Richard.
I guess I have a comment and then a question. My comment is I take Melissa's point that the city of Eugene needs to step up and do a better job to identify facilities, but let's not hold the memorial building up as anything close to an ideal. We often don't know until very close to activation whether it's available. It's an unmaintained, substandard building. And I'll stop there except to say it is not acceptable. It is what we have. That's not our idea. No. So my question, maybe this is partly for Bethany too. I don't know. I mean, the county's done a hot wash. St. Vincent de Paul has done a hot wash. Eugene has done some kind of hot wash. I assume Springfield has done some kind of a hot wash. So all this has been going on. My understanding of a hot wash actually has a military background, which is after an engagement, you come back and immediately find out what went well, what went badly, and make changes right away into a solution. And what I'm hearing is a statement of the problem. We were overwhelmed. We ran out of resources, and the cities and the county ought to coordinate better, which is sort of a nice way of saying nobody came to our aid.
No, you heard me say that my emergency operations center didn't have appropriate vectors and wasn't prepared to necessarily.
Okay,
yeah.
So we have a statement of the problem. But I'm frankly disappointed because I was coming here thinking I was going to hear some solutions. For 3 months, I really just wanted to hear why this was going to happen.
Let me reiterate that.
But I know that's not your job. You're coordinating, you're figuring. I still want to know why isn't this going to happen again?
It is.
And when will we know that? You're going to present a report to the Board of County Commissioners that's probably going to be a statement of the problems. Are there action items that will assure us that we're going to do a better job next time? I just don't see it so far.
Yes, let me restate those to you. That we will circle back to the people that we met with in these hot washes, our medical and health partners and our sheltering partners, and we'll have conversations about how our plans can be improved and how those operations that serve you during an emergency from the EOC will be improved. I mean, it is a cycle of improvement. Ensuring that we have public health staff that is dedicated to meeting the needs of this group because you have that relationship with them, ensuring that we have someone else that is meeting the needs of other sheltering, right? So it all has to do with process improvement. And there are ideas that have been identified. To be honest, we've heard a lot of the same things for the entire 8 weeks, and so identifying sort of those action items in advance where we'll make improvements. I want to be really clear and manage your expectations about what I have control over, which is the Emergency Operations Center. I can say to the city, I need to coordinate better with you, and I have some control over that. I don't have control over a lot of what the city does. What I can control or try to control is how we coordinate together. And none of us do it alone. It is largely coordination. Those process improvements are very tangible, and those are the things that I think will make a difference at any time.
I have a report from online. One, your sound is great. Tiffany, if you can move your thing a little closer if possible. And just a reminder to folks, please talk loudly and directly right into the microphone. I've got Richard, then Nick, and then, yeah, okay.
Just a quick follow-up. I'm sorry, I really want to give everybody a chance to speak, but I understand, Tiffany, I understand your role. My point is we have other people represented here. We have 2 cities. We have St. Vincent de Paul. We have other people who can say something about what is actually tangibly going to change and be different. Not just process, but what is the action items. And I'd still like to hear it.
I'd like to know if there's anyone responsible in these situations, or if everybody was off for the holiday and no one was available, that no resources were allotted for the coming storm to deal with it. I get a feeling, and it's kind of ludicrous almost, because all the employees of the city and the government are going to get paid anyhow these ice days. The facility is going to be set unused, and nothing's going to be saved by not making things available. But no one has that responsibility it seems to be. There was nobody available to release these resources. Our volunteers will step up, but if there's no place we can step up to serve, we can't do it. We have to clear out the fairgrounds. It's not going to be used. The building's going to sit empty. Employees are going to be paid for not showing up, but we have to clear it out. Who is the person, or is there a person that makes that decision to say, okay, why don't we let you stay there? And make it early enough that we can adjust our shifts, get our food there, and do things. And not wait, well, we have to clear this out at 9 o'clock. Well, there's no use. The building's going to sit there empty. And is there a person, or can there be a person designated in the future that we can contact and say, we want to stay in this building because it's unsafe to release the children?
I think that's a gap that we have, to your point, and thinking that other people are coming or that you can go to another location. Those are facility and personnel resources that I think we need to dig into and understand. Those are absolutely reasonable expectations.
That's a solution, to have a person responsible that is known throughout from all the different organizations, all the different vectors, that in the case there is a person responsible that can make the decision early enough. Like the U of O closed down their campus at 8 o'clock on Saturday. All the events got canceled. Someone there made the decision. I was at the basketball game. There was a volleyball thing going on. People made a decision, closed everything down. They had a solution. So the solution is, I'm suggesting the solution, I'm not just talking about the problem, that there be a person in place that everybody knows has the ability to release the resources to be used in the emergency.
Hi, I'm Nick. I actually work with St. Vincent de Paul, and I just wanted to share some information. I'm not going to ask a question, but I've heard a little bit about, well, churches or faith communities in general I just wanted to let you know that at the beginning of this season, we reached out to every faith community in Eugene and Springfield, just in regards to being a warming center. And 4 said, sure, 4. And this is one of them. And the other 3, one is much smaller than this one, and the other 2 were sure, but you can't use this on Fridays, or, we have a preschool at 7 a.m., so you'd have to be out by 6:30 or whatever. I don't mean to speak for all faith communities, but as a member of this faith community, I know that many of us are struggling with membership right now and with budgets, a lot of faith communities are closing. Trinity, which is one of our long-term sites, is closing. It's no longer a church. We don't think we're going to have them next year. So I just feel like maybe, I'm just assuming that solutions are being come up with at this time. Maybe they're not ready yet, but maybe not relying on faith communities as part of that solution is a good idea. Faith communities are already overburdened as it is. And so I would like to see the city and the counties, come up with some other method. Public spaces, public buildings being used as shelters, ones that are available when they're needed all the time.
Thank you. Hi, sort of building off of what Nick just said and what Melissa said, it seems like we have to assume that there's going to be a next time, and that it's not just about ice, it can also be about smoke improvements, because I remember a time when the city did open some facilities, when smoke was so bad it was not outside, and it's going to be other things. So I guess I'm wondering, or advocating, is there someone who says, okay, we have an emergency, we need to build an emergency preparedness plan, the next emergency, it's going to happen, we need public facilities, we need staff for those facilities, we need things, and we need funding. And who is that? Who can we talk to and say, this is what, we have a lot of good ideas about, I think they can be addressed. But somebody needs to take charge, to give them the authority, and give them the funding to do it. And I guess I'm wondering, I'm guessing that's not you in your role, but I don't know. Like, who's that?
Well, I think pointing to any one agency is where we start to run into problems because we all have a hand in it. I performed a project in my last county when we started encountering the overwhelming sheltering issues that we would have in certain situations. And what we did was what I started to describe was just started inventorying and assessing our situation to identify the needs back to the neighborhoods. We're in the process of identifying hubs, slicing up the county where people wouldn't be able to get to one another and starting to plan through that lens. So it's a function at every level of government to perform that level of planning. And I think this really highlighted a gap in our community where I've seen it happen in other communities where you haven't had sheltering needs for a while, and Red Cross was doing it the last time, and so it's not a problem unique to Lane County. I just think it's something we need to get our arms around and understand where the needs are.
So who's the we here? I guess I'm just curious. Where does kind of the box stop in the fact with making decisions about having a plan in place, enacting the plan, and establishing transportation funding?
That's for a city to make. That's for the county to make. It's not one big decision. It has very much to do with jurisdictional boundaries. And so that's not to say that we'll be doing it in a vacuum, but it is to say that we have different considerations and different populations and different geographic regions.
Yeah, my name is Luther Brulick. I've been involved with Egan 7 years. I did earthquake shelters in San Francisco after the earthquake. The problem with much of disaster planning is everybody says somebody else is going to do it. Somebody else is going to do it. I can tell you, Red Cross is good for certain things, but there's serious limitations. I hope this is being recorded. I hope somebody is taking down suggestions. As far as places to do, I have a number of suggestions right now. 1059 Willamette Street is the old Plains County Lake Community College building. It's been empty for a long time. I don't know what the state is, but that should be looked at. The Y as a new facility. I'm assuming that the old facility is more or less empty. It might be available. The fairgrounds is a county facility. The county should have the ability to make it much more available than they did. It was sort of, to my understanding, a last resort that Wheeler became available. I hope that the ballpark doesn't pass, but if it does, I hope that the county is going to have an absolute ironclad contract with them, that in an emergency, I don't care what's happening, we have priority. The beauty of Egan is there are people that step up and make decisions and do things. That's the way problems get solved. It's not by big government planning and so on and so forth, but certainly the government can help facilitate things. LCC, out on their main campus, has a lot of facilities. I realize transportation is a problem there, but that's a possibility. I'm sure that if you talk to other people, they have other places that they can suggest that might be possible. I'm sure there are problems with a lot of the ones I've suggested. They may be impossible, but it needs to be specific. You know, who can look into Plain Community College building at 1059 Willamette Street? Who can look at why the fairgrounds were not more available? Certainly out there, there's room to put containers to facilitate winter problems and openings. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to say one thing. I'm not sure where the notion is coming about the fairgrounds space not being available. They've been a great partner these last few years, and that space was ours throughout the entire ice storm. We were not being kicked out at all. They were very gracious, and even when Dust to Dawn had to move at the last second during the ice storm because of their gas being out. So that's not the issue. The issue was Egan is there all night long until the morning. You are there. We could not ask you to keep going during the daytime. We weren't kicked out of the space. We just needed you to be relieved somehow by somebody because it just wasn't sustainable and it wasn't safe for you. So a lot of what I gathered in the ice storm was logistics problems, right? Like we were there, but we didn't have people to come and take over for us. We didn't have vehicles to get the people there. We didn't have ways to get folks into those sites. But they have been very gracious to us to offer those spaces at the last minute. So I just want folks to realize that about Lynn in particular. And, you know, some of this, yes, we're going to have to do better on our own. And one of the online comments was, can we figure out how we can survey volunteers who can get out in adverse conditions and who can pick people up? And do we have neighborhood drop or pickup points for volunteers so that we can do a better job of our own logistics to get folks out? St. Vincent de Paul, more and more, as an organization in the last few years, when this happens, it's all hands on deck, which doesn't mean that they can send everybody over, but they send people as they can to help out. That last Tuesday night was just such a challenge. You know, you can blame me for some of it, because I said, we are not going to do this as Egan. It's above our temperature, and we can't do it. Our volunteers can't do it. They need a break. And then we didn't have any other solutions. And so Springfield was Egan, but the fairgrounds was actually not technically Egan. It was just a shelter that St. Vincent de Paul ran, with help from looking at, Melissa and other volunteers that were there, but a lot of staff. So it's just about protecting you all as volunteers. Our community asks too much of you. Yes. But if the whole program gets squashed because of things like that, when we just break the whole system, then our unhoused guests, our neighbors, are really out of luck. So there's that dynamic going on as well. The community cannot keep asking you as volunteers to save them every time, especially when it's something other than cold weather. So that's a huge issue. I don't have anybody else comment. That's too. Okay.
Tato. Hi, I'm Tato. So, is there a mechanism, irrespective of the specific context, whether it's a fire or ice storm or whatever, but is there a mechanism for the county and the two cities to decide together that this is an emergency? Because as I hear conversations, there's doubt in my mind that there is. So that's the question.
Sierra, how does, we coordinated together as Springfield and the city of Eugene, and the county EOC. We were working together through, all of us were challenged in our own jurisdictions, but the counties and cities do typically decide together when an emergency has occurred. A county EOC, by policy, will stand up and activate if we're asked by the cities or asked by any of the districts, because we're there in that supportive role. So, yeah, the decision is typically made, and then it's just, which cities were involved. Cottage Grove, Crestwell, we didn't hear much from Florence, but we communicated with all of the cities during.
And follow up on that, what are some of the criteria for the county and the two cities to decide together that something is an emergency?
When resources are overwhelmed, when we see or we see in advance that things are, it's advanced planning and anticipating what might happen next. And so it can happen at any time. That's the feedback I shared that I got from some of our city and county officials, which was, we're happy to lean into it early, even if we're just in a monitoring status and it turns into nothing. And so that's absolutely something that we can do better. I need to understand better. The question mark for me is the city's threshold for activating your emergency operations center.
This question is coming from Chris McAllister, Director of Carrier Ford, who's actually asked us to step in and help provide manpower at the point that he ran out of manpower and wasn't a workable situation. And the question is, how can the county use its scope of work and jurisdiction to bring services to make congregate shelters workable? Because we're not doing it like emergency management, we're doing it like a bait stand. We have to reach out to the state for help at this point. But what can the county do to provide for that and bring services to shelters once they're identified? If it's local schools in small neighborhoods, if it's a major spot like the Kiefer Center on Main Street, what can the county do to bring services to those shelters once they're identified?
I don't know. I mean, I think that that's a community effort that involves folks that own the facilities, the jurisdictions who are impacted, and all the people that come together. We certainly have access to funding resources. we can leverage efforts along those lines, and we can help coordinate the partners that are part of it.
But the page alerts didn't happen. None of the page alerts went out. All the systems that we have page alerts by community that can go out to residents. None of that was utilized during this event.
Say more about what a page alert is.
During fire instances or during smoke instances, the county has the ability to access individual neighbors by text.
Okay.
There's a fire warning for that.
Yes, and that's what I said. We didn't use it for this, and that was a gap. We heard that from community members, and we heard it from the dispatch center, that we could have utilized that system. At the front end, people that didn't have power at the back end weren't getting those alerts anyway. So quite a few things about public alerts.
I just have a quick comment. So I appreciated hearing about your experience at the start with your former county and developing a Cascadia subduction zone plan and focusing on earthquake situations. I was part of the small group of volunteers who spoke at the Wayne County Commissioners meeting originally after the ice storm happened. And one of the most shocking things that they said at that meeting was their acknowledgement that Wayne County doesn't even have a Cascadia subduction zone plan. There is no earthquake plan. So I know we are all here for the ice storm, which is absolutely important. And also, what are you going to do for the Cascadia subduction zone?
Yeah, so, like, to be clear, we have annexes and parts of our emergency operations plan that address seismic response. We work on it all the time. We partner with the other agencies on resilience efforts, preparedness. We have a hazard mitigation plan. We're pulling in dollars from the federal government after these disasters to harden the systems that we have. We are woefully unprepared for the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a race for time. And so we'll just keep moving forward in the ways that we have. A lot of good work has been done in this county around seismic resilience and moving forward. But I'll tell you, after all the time.
So this is really, I think, aimed more at us as an organization, as part of St. Vincent de Paul, is I'd like to see us having, for instance, contracts already in place with cahoots or, to certain parts of the county of people who can be approved or pre-approved to be emergency volunteers or emergency paid folks, so that we're not scrambling during the middle of an event to have that happen. For instance, cahoots was off the road. Those people were not all stuck in their house. Many of them would have come to a call, either volunteer or on a paid basis. And there's a reason why we couldn't have those kind of agreements hammered out ahead of time. And that's what I really like to see, like, who are our 10 organizations we can call? Who are the 10 people at the city that have said, I'd love to be there and help, and I can walk from my house, and those sorts of things. Thank you so much for joining our county. I'm really excited to hear more about community planning around disaster. It's kind of one of my favorite things. And the ice storm was not an isolated event. That's the third ice storm that had a serious ice storm that has happened during the time that I've been at Egan, which I think is less than 10 years. One of the ice storms, we had to move an entire one site to another site due to an insurer's change of heart. And another one, again, we had to run a daytime shelter because it was too dangerous and there were no services for our folks. So I think even looking just at ice storms, or just at very severe winter weather, we're going to keep having those times when Egan needs a backup for the daytime, Egan Plus, like that. Yeah. Thank you.
I heard you reference the county's jurisdiction over at Upriver, Kings River. I have kiddos that go to school upriver, and at Walterville and family upriver. What was the county's plan for emergency response during ice storm for upriver? That's McKinsey.
What I was saying is that when we talk about mass care and sheltering, that our that we're primarily keeping an eye on those unincorporated areas for which we have, not exclusively, but that's just our jurisdictional. And we would rely on our response partners upriver to let us know if there were needs up there. We would hear from the fire chiefs or someone upriver to help us understand that a need had emerged.
We've got time for just a couple more. I want to make sure that we get everybody out by 7. To go back to the very first question, I was also at Springfield on the first day of the ice storm, and we just couldn't stand having people huddling outside, just trying to stay away from the wind chill. I mean, it was amazing how many people were in such a close proximity to the door. And there was that, like, this is way too early. And then she said that she was like, I can't have this happen. I was like, okay, I agree completely. It's like, these are the things we need to do to get ready. We just, no programming for that kind of situation. But, and so there was a real worry that this would come back on us, right? And then, 2 police officers show up, and they were like, "Oh, great, you're open. We have this lady," and they started bringing people to us well before which was excellent because it reaffirmed what we were doing was correct. And but we didn't know that we could. There wasn't like a thing that was like, it was our emotional standpoint of feeling that this was not right. We were not treating these people like we want to. And so that moral obligation to open up the doors early affected me, and I hated feeling guilty like that we're possibly hurting Egan as the community by helping these people when we're technically not allowed to be helping these people. It was a troubling moment amongst a very difficult situation. So what I'd like to see is something where it's just a normality where, like, if it's deemed to be like, say, drops below 30 at a much earlier point, I mean, or 20, whatever the magic number is, but be like, as soon as we can pull the trigger on it and get people at least inside, not getting fed, and not just be inside. I'd like to see something come about where we can pull the cord earlier in these terrible situations.
Developing a new emergency threshold for you.
Yeah. Both front and back. The opening and also how, because sending somebody out in 15-degree weather, just because it's light out, seems absolutely ridiculous to me. Or even in that situation, trying to relocate them somewhere. If nobody's driving, how are you going to get 3 people in wheelchairs? Even 5 blocks. So the before and after of these situations, there's such a gray zone for us. We know what we're supposed to do, but that's not sometimes falling in line with why we're doing it.
Yeah, that's why I like a newly defined threshold, because it's all gray until, if you have a threshold, it's a more binary situation. Nope, we're there. Not somebody having to scream and shout and, call people on.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I'm curious, so I do understand that there's a lot of different agencies and organizations that will have to be involved in figuring this out. I think a lot of us have pretty severe anxiety about how do we stay engaged to the extent that we can so that we know how to be effective, whether that's doing some rabble-rousing from the outside and showing up to public meetings. I understand that a lot of this work will ultimately get done by people through their jobs in government and at cities. But this is the kind of really important thing that needs some element of public information and public process. I'm wondering if you have any advice on how that component can happen so we have transparency as things change.
Yeah, I think, it's important for me to like restate, I don't have a lot of answers for some of these questions because we haven't done this before. So we will be figuring out how it works. And I think that's where we don't know what it looks like yet, but we know that you know what it looks like. And like, I feel like this group is the subject matter expert in what we're talking about trying to accomplish more broadly. And I think that's an opportunity for your representatives to stay involved, because if we don't have Red Cross and we don't have faith-based institutions and we're relying on city or county staff or volunteers that haven't done it before, like we have to find our way with that. And I think if we can standardize, to what extent we can standardize and are doing it the same, where possible, I think that makes things work out more easily. It gives us maybe a deeper bench, maybe you draw more support, and we're just more nimble when the time comes.
Thank you. I guess I was more specifically meaning something like, is there a committee who has a specific chair? Are there funds allocated to the process? Are there going to be, quarterly updates on what changes have been identified and implemented, or meeting minutes that are available online? Something like that, so that we can keep tuning in.
Yeah, those emergency support function meetings that EWEB is standing up, have you, anyway, they started a series of meetings that I think we could use to piggyback on. I think we could stand one up ourselves. I don't know.
Okay, one more, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Hey Tiffany, my name is Emily, and I'm a pretty new Egan volunteer, and I actually wasn't involved with the ice storm because I couldn't get out of my house. And I just want to acknowledge that, first of all, this is like, if you're new to this job, it's only been a couple of months, so welcome down to the valley again. I'm also a pretty native Oregonian, and I just want to invite you personally to come check out Egan yourself. I know you mentioned at the very beginning that this is work that you couldn't do, but I just want to extend the invitation. You might surprise yourself, and even if you don't do a full shift, maybe come shadow one of us, because the vibe I'm getting in here tonight is like, none of the people sitting here have an issue with, helping or wanting to do more. And I'm also extending this invitation to the three of you who I can't remember your names, I'm just going to look at your back the whole time, and anybody who's online, because this is our community. And all I'm hearing is county this, and city this, and this jurisdiction, and it honestly just feels like word salad to me. And I'm like, you know what, at the end of the day, this is our community. And it doesn't matter if someone's homeless or houseless or unhoused. I mean, it's just we have to care. We belong to each other. So I just want to invite you to personally just come hang out. There's things you can do where you don't have to interact with it. I get it. It's not for everyone, but that's just all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, Bethany has really been generous, and I toured one of the sites, and I hope to see more of the resources and facilities.
Trust you.
Oh, please.
Tiffany. Emily, thank you for that. Just really quick, I do work with the county in public health emergency preparedness, so I am your gal to reach out to for ahead of all these things that come our way. I'm pretty new to the role. I am a Egan volunteer. Also, I did some shifts downstairs late night after paid work, right? Volunteer. And it's not easy, but it's also, I know that you all are some of the biggest, hardest people. There's a lot more people out there in our community that need to not feel intimidated, right, by coming and getting involved. And we also need, as a county, city citizens, just really continue this conversation. I feel like there's a whole lot more there. There's mental health aspects that I want to really dive into, and I invite you to come to discussions in your neighborhood. I think with Melissa, I think you hit on a lot of ideas that would nudge us toward solutions, or at least better preparedness. One thing you said was that neighborhood scale preparedness, meeting your neighbors, knowing who needs what or has what, that kind of asset mapping as it's called. there's a whole lot there. This is just the start. So thanks, Tiffany, for taking the brunt of these questions. Really, all of us did a great job, and it's great to spend time with you all.
Thanks for coming. My name is Mike. I'm an Egan volunteer. And the discussion tonight seemed to have revolved around operations, getting people from one place to another, transportation, logistics type things, food, shelter, first aid, medical, transportation, that kind of things. When these emergencies occur, especially under ASF, is the incident command system ever implemented? I mean, that would give a definite chain of command. You'd have someone to deal with your finance issues, someone to deal with your logistics issues, someone to deal with your operations, your safety, health, and welfare. I just want to know if that's considered.
Yeah, absolutely, emergency operations center. But you know, we've got that basic incident command system, and I think it has the basics, and then you have things pop up that sort of challenge the system in ways that you didn't learn in the class, right? They didn't teach you that your sheltering system might blow up, and then what do you do with that? And so it's really about just addressing where we find those spots when we do.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Tiffany. I think it was pretty clear that we went right back to that night, and all that trauma that we felt that night came back. A lot of it. And these are folks that help people who nobody else will help, who every day is an emergency. And I know that you know that. And so it's more than just the ice storm. It scratches that little itch of so many things that we don't do for the people in the community who really need that. You know, I'm not sure why I'm going here, but you know, the fires a couple of years ago, right? Boy, did the community spring into action when some folks lost their homes along the river, and they needed help. But every day, we have so many of our folks, our neighbors, who face that. And so we do so much for the community, and we ask so little. So this is the time that we're asking for a little more.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's all about.
I can imagine that a situation like this makes you feel something for granted. And I hear.
Yeah, and you know, who do we need to talk to? We need to talk to our neighbors, right? It's the elected officials that are going to make these decisions. They can't just start spending money that they don't have. They can't just make policy decisions because we think it's a good thing to do, because they think it's a good thing to do too. They can't just do that, right? They report to the folks that are elected by all of our neighbors. So it's fundamental changes that it's going to take to do this. But I'll stop there. Thanks for coming, everybody. We really appreciate your time. Everybody who's listening online. Anybody have any other final word for the order?
Thank you, Tim.
Tiffany. Bethany.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that I really admire about this group is the discontent with the way things are, because we should be discontent with the way things are. We're not going to have a change if we're content with people being put out on the street during the day. One of the things that we really need moving forward is the public spaces that are staying open during the day, so that the Egan volunteer system is not exasperated. We have our day access centers that we'll continue to have open, but when we have the transportation limitations, we had, as you know, Egan volunteers moving individuals, as well as our IT director moving individuals from the dawn-to-dawn system. This was a very unique event that happened, which really put a strain on the existing system, whether it was St. Paul, Egan, the county, the city. And we are working, and to your question, John, as far as what are we doing moving forward, we're looking at putting together our own emergency response team at St. Paul, because we're looking at, we are moving forward, and when you look around and you don't see the people alongside you, you think, what can I do to make a difference moving forward, so that we don't have a system that is as strained as it is. So we're looking at trying to secure additional vehicles, because our staff were out there every day during the ice storm. We had people similar to, I think there was a gentleman, the younger John who had worked 17 hours. We had staff who were doing the same thing. So I look at what I ask myself and my staff to do, what we ask volunteers to do. I have the same expectation from public safety. So I'm hopeful that moving forward we can collaborate on this and create a healthier system for every member of the communities that we live in, because it shouldn't matter if it's an individual who's powerless, housed, unhoused. We should as a society have a safe space for anyone who's impacted, and keeping people alive should be the #1 priority from the Incident Command Center. I'm not sure still where that priority was. So thank you again for everything that you did. I'm thankful for the different members of the COAD, for Maria's quick responses. And another thing that we're looking at is securing additional hotel partners, because we had an offer from the county to be able to put people in hotels during this event. We maxed out the number of hotels that would work with us because of transport. Well, even with the transfer, we were moving individuals with staff vehicles, and we ran out of hotel partners who were interested in working with the unsheltered population. So we're working on expanding those relationships and working with someone who had worked for Red Cross previously, because I was surprised that we didn't have that support. So we're looking at, as an organization, how do we build the partnerships that we need to in order to better serve the community members in times of crisis. And once again, I appreciate for you coming out here, and as you had said, kind of being in that hot seat and fielding all of these questions. As you came on board right after this happened. So thank you for spending your evening, taking your time and energy, and trying to help us improve the system. And I'm hopeful for tomorrow, but I also know this is going to take a lot of work.
Thank you all.
As a final note, how many people were having a hard time hearing the conversation?
I heard it great.
Everybody? Anybody in the back row? Did everybody understand what was being said? This is the final thought. If you're speaking into a microphone, make sure you take the microphone with you when you're animated. You can be animated, just take the microphone with you, so you speak to the back of the room. If you're speaking to people right in front of you, the people in the back of the room can't hear anything.